All right, good day to you. My name is Fred Oakman, and as always with me today is Mr. Jake Peters. We are PS This Is Awesome, a PlayStation podcast. This is episode 146. This is a show where we share our feelings about the current state of PlayStation. But before we get on with the show, I'd like to invite you all to subscribe to our channel on YouTube and visit us on Twitter and Tumblr. If you want to make fun of our trophy lists on the PSN, you can find me at anchorlist_81 and Mr. Jake Peters at jakesaw01. As always, you can write the show at psthisisawesome@gmail.com. And most importantly, don't forget to share the show with your friends and be sure to leave comments and rate the podcast as you see fit. For anybody who's been waiting, this is going to serve as our Last of Us Part 2 spoiler/conversation episode. I kind of thought, Jake, that maybe we would do this as a completely separate episode, but we don't have enough time to do that. So if the listeners were looking forward to 146 and they haven't played The Last of Us Part 2 yet, we'll let you know when we get into that conversation. We're going to do all the regular show shit before, and then when we get into The Last of Us conversation, you can just shut it off then if you haven't played the game yet or you don't want it spoiled for yourself. Jake, how are you today?
Fine. I'm sore, but a little tired. Yeah, I'm fine. You took a nap today?
Yeah, man, I fell asleep. It was one of those things where I just probably have coronavirus or some shit. We've been playing out concerts and stuff. A wave of tiredness just overcame me today, and I was just like, I gotta fucking go to bed. I'm tired. Like, I don't know. I've been kind of in a funk, but you know how it goes, man. It's summertime. All the grass is terrible looking, and the heat's just been beating down on us for a good week now. So I was just tired. I needed to go to sleep, so I took an hour nap, and here we are doing the podcast again Sunday evening. It is 7:48 to be exact on July 12th. Are you playing any games right now?
So once I beat The Last of Us Part 2, I didn't really feel like jumping into anything else. So I've just honestly been playing Super Mario World. I got my Super Nintendo out and I've been playing that a little bit. And that's pretty much all I've been playing. I played a little bit of yesterday whenever I was at the track on my motorcycle. I had a bunch of time between sessions. So I took my Vita with me because I went by myself, and I played a little bit of Hot Shots Golf on my Vita yesterday. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, man, that sounds awesome. Yeah, you mentioned that on the last show that you needed I think as you called it, a palate cleanser. I have not really gotten into any games. I haven't gone back to Origins. This is going to sound very similar to our last episode, but I did dive into Star Wars Battlefront 2 single player campaign, and it's pretty lackluster so far, and it's really fucking hard. So if you're going to play that, Jake, put it on the easiest mode possible because it's really easy to die in that game.
Are you talking about Battlefront 2?
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't played that at all, but I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah, make sure you play it on easy. Rumor is, Jake, and if correct, by the time the listeners are tuning into this episode, we all may have been graced with a pre-order date and the price for the PS5. This information came to the show from our dear friend LJ, who wrote in last episode, who has apparently been dialed in a little more than either of us. And of course, this is speculation and coming from another source by the name of Jeff Grubb, who apparently predicted the date of the PS5 event and the Xbox Series X event. This Jeff Grubb guy came out and said that we are going to get the pre-order date and the price of the PlayStation 5 tomorrow. I don't know if I believe this. What do you think? I'm calling a little bit of bullshit on this.
I mean, I guess it's possible, but it seems kind of weird that they would just like all of a sudden just release that kind of information out into the world without having some kind of a little bit of a hype or something behind it. But it could be that, maybe they're just, they just want to get it out there. But I honestly believe that they're going to let Microsoft go first. I mean, I could be wrong, but they have nothing to lose by letting Microsoft go first. So why not? The only reason they wouldn't let Microsoft go first, in my opinion, is if they found out what Microsoft is charging for it and they know they're charging less. And then they could come out early and say, look at this, we're fucking charging $450 or $400 or whatever the hell it's going to be for the PS5. And then that way, when Microsoft has their big event this coming week, they'll have to sort of eat it again like they did with the Xbox One reveal and say like, oh, it's going to be more expensive. It just doesn't make sense to me for them to just drop this kind of information to the public with no precursor whatsoever.
Right. My thought process on this would be that the only reason that something like this would happen or could happen is maybe they're there is so much in the channel already that there's already, like, these are just already preset on the Amazon store, the Walmart store, all these stores globally. Like, some reason there's been a ticking clock, and they're just going to announce it before this stuff hits the web so that Sony can make the announcement. I guess that's possible. I don't know. I just don't think that they've come up with a price yet, but I almost feel like they have to have a price at this point. But you're probably right. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense for them to wait for Microsoft.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they have an idea, but it's probably like, if Microsoft is coming out with this, then we can compete with them at this price, but we really don't want to. So if they come out a little bit higher, then we can kind of give the price that we actually really want to charge for this unit. Like, I don't think that Sony's going to try and gouge us or anything. But they may say, like, with the cost of manufacture and all this stuff, it really would be good if we could try and get $550 out of this unit. But if Microsoft forces our hand, we could charge $500 for it and not take too bad of a loss, but stay competitive and keep a hold of the market that we already own, essentially. I'm sure they have an idea of what they think they might charge for it. It's just that they're waiting for almost like Microsoft to make the decision for them, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, they hold the cards right now. Sony holds the cards in the console war, if you want to call it that. But it is capitalism at its finest, and they're competitors, so that drives market price. So yeah, it just makes sense, man. It just makes sense for them to hold off. They're in a holding pattern with Microsoft. I don't know how long this can possibly go on, though, but eventually the fish has to bite the hook, and someone's got to make a move. We need to maybe invite this LJ onto the show, man. From what I understand, he's been out of the world of gaming for a bit, but he is getting pretty hyped for the PS5. He is a fan of the music that we've made in my punk rock band, One Up by Land. He seems pretty knowledgeable and informed. And speaking of guests, Jake, on the show, we might have some awesome news to announce soon, but we're going to leave it right there. I don't want to come out in case it doesn't work. We may be having somebody involved in the industry come onto the show. We'll see. We're going to try to orchestrate a little something, and if it works, awesome. If it doesn't, then, so be it. Jake, news. Ubisoft Forward happened today. Did you see anything about this?
I didn't see anything. I just saw that they released some information about Watchdogs Legion. I didn't really look at it at all. I just saw that they had something where it was like, you can recruit up to like 3 million people or something like that in the game. You can recruit them to be like you could play as them, I'm guessing, or whatever. I know they talked about this shit like fucking 5 years ago when they announced this game, and they kept pushing it back or whatever. And it sounds like they've released a lot of information about it today, I guess. I have a hard time really caring all that much about Watch Dogs, so I don't know much about it, but just picked up on the Watch Dogs thing because it kind of passed through my feed.
Yeah, there was a really cool, I did watch it. I watched it while you were cooking up some chili dogs today. I did watch it, and it started off with a short film that was inspired by the game, which I thought was like a video game trailer for the game, but they said it was a short film when it ended. It was weird, but this game's coming October 29th to the PS4. The game's going to be taking place in London. And the thing that kind of struck me about this short film was kind of cool. It was like this voiceover, and it was like this person that was running from police or running from the government or whatever, and causing all kinds of problems or wreaking havoc, trying to avoid the police. There's cars wrecking and this person's just trying to escape. But the voiceover is like, first, they came for the foreigners, but I didn't speak up because I'm not a foreigner. Next, they came for the protesters, but I didn't speak up because I'm not a protester. Then they came for the journalists, but I didn't say anything because I'm not a journalist. Then they came for the street artists, but I didn't say anything because I wasn't a street artist. I realized, though, eventually they'd come for me and there'd be no one left to speak for me. And like, it shows this, that's like the thing. And then it shows him, this character eventually making their way into a taxi and then telling the taxi driver to take the person to a certain location. They get to this location. They both walk into the bar, and there's tons of people in there with these weird masks. And the person in the bar is like, well, welcome to the resistance. And the taxi driver, looks up because he's in the bar. He's looking at this whole resistance group. He looks up at the bar, and he sees a TV on in the bar, and it's the taxi driver's face. And it was just like, taxi driver wanted for assisting, aiding, and abetting, blah, 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 believed to be part of the resistance. And then this logo came up that says, reclaim your future. So it just seemed kind of cool. Like, that short film looked really awesome. But then they cut to some gameplay, and the developers were talking, and they said that in the game, you actually recruit a team of people. You just find on the streets, you kind of vet them through their digital devices and see if they're going to be in league with what you stand for. And then they actually become part of the team, and they actually become part of the story. The developers kind of talking about, like, these are heroes you choose to invest in, and they create the story with you. And it could be any of these characters. Essentially, it looked kind of cool. London's under attack, and London turns to a private military to keep everybody safe. But the private military is, treating people terribly. And so it's interesting. Another thing they showed, Jake, was Tom Clancy's Elite Squad. There was the dude from Siphon Filter. There was one of the bad guys from Ghost Recon, I believe, Wildlands, the guy that was all tatted up. He was in there. There were some other Tom Clancy characters that showed up. And I don't know what this game was, but they were all like cartoonified. They all look like Borderlands characters. And I don't know what they were doing or what the game was even about. Did you see anything about that? Tom Clancy's Elite Squad, I think is what it was called.
I didn't see anything about this, but it seems to me like, and they talk about this on that Sacred Symbols podcast that I think we both listen to, is that like a lot of these games now are just starting to adopt the graphical cartooniness of something like Fortnite. And it's really disappointing. I mean, I haven't seen it, so I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but it sounds to me like maybe it's something like that. And if that's the case, then it's really depressing. I mean, I don't know if maybe they're doing this because graphically it's easier to render, so they can do larger open worldy kind of online things a little bit easier when they're,
it just looks like a cartoon.
Models look like ass.
Yeah, it just looks like a cartoon.
I don't know.
I mean, it looks fine. I mean, but it doesn't look like anything new and exciting. It's just the characters that we've come kind of grown to know and love from the Tom Clancy games. They also touched on Hyperscape, which is like a battle royale game. It makes it seem it's kind of like, what the hell is that movie where they all have to represent their country or their areas and it's their way to freedom or something? It's almost like, do you remember that old 80s movie?
Hunger Games?
Yeah, but what was that old 80s movie? Man, who was in that? Where it's battle a game royale? Show. No, Schwarzenegger's in it. Oh man, Running Man. Do you remember that game, that movie called Running Man from the 80s?
Yeah.
It's like that. It's like all these people are in this battle royale, and it's their chance to win their freedom. Is like they have to be the last one to live. And like that's like Running Man exactly. Arnold Schwarzenegger was like a criminal, and he was incarcerated for maybe wrongly, but if he could get through this game, it's almost like Smash TV also. We get through this gauntlet that was like advertised nationally on the TV show, and it showed people killing people and stuff. Like it was just like, imagine it's like the Hunger Games meets that, like you're only in there because you're considered a criminal, not because you lost a lottery. And you're like a bad guy, quote unquote bad guy, and a badass. And you have to fight all these gladiators. Like American Gladiator meets Hunger Games meets live TV. And the only way that the criminal is allowed to earn their freedom is if they kill all of these guys in this gauntlet and get out alive. I need to watch Running Man again. Wild. Yeah. But I mean, again, the graphics look crappy. They look like Fortnite or something. So it looked kind of stupid to me. We saw a lot of Assassin's Creed Valhalla gameplay, a 30-minute in-depth demo. They did make it known that you can be either a male or a female character. Essentially, your Viking clan, you run out of resources and you're going to England so that you can fight into England and build your own settlements there. Of course, the citizens of England aren't happy with it, and it's just based in history or whatever. And Ubisoft came out and said there's going to be another showcase later this year. So there really wasn't a whole lot, but anyone who was dying to see Assassin's Creed Valhalla gameplay, there was plenty of gameplay. There was so much that I was just like scrubbing through it because it looked to me like every other Assassin's Creed game, if I'm being completely honest. There was nothing that looked great about it. There's nothing that looked bad about it. It just looked like another Assassin's Creed game.
Huh. Yeah, I mean, what do you expect? I mean, Assassin's Creed, with all the improvements that they've made, is still Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, it's not like what they did with God of War or anything. So I want the listeners to know that there definitely is a delay in our communication right now online. So if we sound a little rigid or weird, it's because of that. We did work the kinks out last time, but I think, Jake, you said you're having some network issues right now.
Yeah, our internet's been fucked up today. I'm not really sure if it's an Armstrong issue or what. Even when nobody was using the internet, I was getting terrible, like less than 1 megabit download speeds at home. So I thought it was better, but could be, something still going on or whatever, because there really isn't anything using the internet right now at my house. It's just literally the only thing that I'm doing is this podcast.
Yeah, that's weird. Dude, did you see that it looks like there's going to be a spike in PlayStation 5 game prices at the retail? Like, it looks like they're going to be $69.99 or $70 for a PS5 game. I think this kind of makes the free upgrade seem a little more tantalizing. What do you think about the $70 increase? Or the $10 increase? I think it's fair. I mean, it kind of sucks because it's something we love and people don't like to spend a lot of money on things, but $70 is considerably, that extra $10 just seems like a much bigger number than $59.99. What's your take?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm okay with it, but I guess maybe that's probably at least a little bit because I have a little bit of disposable income. It's not like I'm not destitute or anything. So it, isn't that huge of it. And the number of full-fledged AAA games that I buy every year is relatively low. So having to spend $10 more half a dozen times a year really doesn't mean that much to me, I guess. There's no way this wasn't going to happen eventually, especially when people are demanding more and more and more out of these AAA games. You want a AAA game that's super open world and costs a couple $100 million to make, but you want to pay the same price you've been paying for the past 15 years. It just doesn't make any sense. So if you're one of those guys out there, not to sound cruel or anything, but if you're one of those guys out there that insists that a game is not good if it's not bigger, better graphics, more game hours to play, huge open worlds, all this stuff, if you want more and more and more of that, you cannot expect the price to stay the same because the cost of development is so fucking high now that it's just unreasonable. I think even Sean Layden came out recently in an interview and was just like, look, AAA games as they are right now, the price that they're at, like it's not sustainable. It costs so much money to make these games now that charging $60 for them, it's unreasonable. And the thing is that, you're going to get people out there that are going to be like, look at Grand Theft Auto 5 and look at Uncharted 4 and all this stuff. And it's like, look, for every one of those games that sells 10 plus million copies within the first couple months, there's 10s, 20s, 30s, 40, 50, 100 more games out there that sell less than 1 million copies, but still cost $150 million to make. So, you're talking about a lot of losses that these companies could incur. It's a bigger gamble. It's a bigger and bigger gamble every single time one of these games gets made. And I think increasing the price to $70 is a start to kind of mitigating that and getting these companies interested in still footing the bill to make these big games.
Yeah, man, you make a good point. I mean, I see inflation in the music industry with me, like putting out music and albums. I'm getting some t-shirts made. T-shirts aren't as cheap as what they once were to make. And that's not because of whatever, but, there's this push to be more environmentally friendly these days. So, I'm trying to use non-plastisol ink and I'm trying to do it on nicer t-shirts that aren't Gildans that fit, that are wider than they are long. I mean, and then the dollar, inflation happens. The one thing that I think that's really interesting about as a video game developer, if you know your game's going to retail at 70 instead of 60, it might make you second guess what you're working on. Can we sell this for $70? Is there enough want for us to put this game out that we're going to move enough copies at $70 to make our money back? Because once you start raising the price of something, you start limiting the audience that can afford it or are willing to buy it. So you better have a really good product. And I agree. I mean, games should be 70 now. It's just ridiculous, the quality of games that we're getting. I mean, look at The Last of Us Part 2. We're going to talk about that. The other issue is there's a lot of risk, I would imagine, being developer because the game industry is so big now. The game industry is so huge. There's so much competition. There are AAA developers making games for a lot of money, but don't get me wrong. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to put out even like an indie game. even if you have a small group of people, I mean, those people in your indie studio are they're not working other jobs. Like, that's their income. And the developer has to pay those people to do that job, a livable wage. And if they're developers, they're good at what they do, they should be getting paid something half decent so they don't get gobbled up by somebody like Naughty Dog or somebody like whomever, that is going to give them a pension and give them all these great things to sign on with them. So it's a very competitive world, I would imagine. But it is interesting. I mean, at face value, yeah, $70. I mean, that's kind of implicative that most of the games are going to go up in price. And, I agree with you. I think we definitely should be paying that amount of money. And we both have a little bit of expendable income, and an extra $10 here and there, not a big deal. And if you can't afford it, then just fucking wait 6 months and it'll be down to $40 or $30 or something, digitally or whatever. So that's another thing. Like, you don't have to buy these games when they come out right away. Just, give them a little time, let them breathe a little bit, and then they'll get knocked down in the store or something. That's all I really have to say about that. Do you have anything else you want to talk about as far as the game prices going up? Because I think that's going to be a topic that comes up more repeatedly as we get closer to PS5.
No, I think it's pretty much beat to death at this point. It's not really a thing that I would be super concerned about.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really can't afford it. I mean, the thing is that people... There's a common, I know this is a very controversial thing to say, but there's a common rule of or way of thinking in the video game industry that like it should be cheap so that people can afford it. Whereas it's like, it's a frivolous hobby. Like, it's not like you don't expect in other industries, you don't expect things to just be cheaper because more people play them. You understand what I'm saying? So like,
right.
Like it's unreasonable for some reason in the video game industry because it's full of a lot of younger people. I mean, there's a lot of older people too that play, but like, there's this mentality that, things should be cheaper. And companies like Amazon have sort of perpetuated that, where they are able to give you like the cheapest shit possible, or like the App Store where games are all free and all this stuff. Yeah. And there's a little bit of a sense of entitlement, I guess, but like, and I wouldn't say that I wholeheartedly disagree, but it's the same time, it's like sometimes you have to think about the fact that if you can't afford to pay what the games cost, like you just can't afford it. Like that just means that you can't play. Like, I can't afford a fucking Ferrari, but I'm not calling up Ferrari and telling them they need to lower the price of their vehicles.
So you can enjoy a Ferrari.
So
right?
That's obviously an extreme example, but it's the same kind of idea.
Yeah, it's interesting, Jake. We've been talking about doing a music video for one of the songs on the record, the Flood, one of the songs on the record we did. And I started looking into video editing, and we had a conversation previously about Adobe Photoshop or the Adobe packages and how it's just, the cost doesn't justify what we would use it for. So we take a hard pass on it. I got Resolve, and then I started doing some research with how I could possibly shoot the video on my iPhone, because I did a lot of research on how you can get a cinematic video shot on like an iPhone XR or whatever, which is what I have. And there's an app for like $15, and I actually bought it. And you can control shutter speed and all this stuff. And then I started looking at it a little more, and I'm like, okay, well, I can see that stuff's overexposed, and I need like a neutral density filter to make things look better. And then, I looked online. I'm like, well, how do you get a neutral density filter for your fucking iPhone? And then you got to buy like a special case that's like $30. And then you got to buy the clip that can convert the case to a 35 or 37 millimeter lens. And then you find the neutral density lens for $20, and then I'm looking at all this, and then I'm like, man, now at this point, can't just hand hold it. Now I need one of those gimbals, for the phones, which are arguably all that shit is way cheaper to do on your phone if you already have the phone than buying all this shit for like a DSLR camera, right? So sometimes you just have to find ways to work around the system. So with what I did, I got some of that stuff. Actually, I have it coming in the mail, and I'm super serious about doing some sort of music video. I did some research. DaVinci Resolve's free, take some YouTube classes that are free online, learn how to do color grading, figure out how to shoot with a gimbal and frame shots. And there you go. You can make a fucking music video for like less than $200. And then you have the tools to do it every time you want to make one. So with the video game thing, it's like, you don't need to buy the game right when it comes out. You don't need the best headset. You know what I mean? Like, if you want a AAA experience, save your money for that game, and then maybe just play indie games. You don't buy every single fucking game that comes out just because you've heard something about it or whatever. They always say like, vote with your wallet or whatever. And you should only be really putting your money into investments in the video game world that you really believe in and the things that you're really, truly interested in. I'm sure there are people out there, Jake, who just feel like they need to buy every single new game that comes out, whether they're interested or not, just because they want it. It's almost like an addiction or something, but I don't know. Speaking of new games coming out, dude, Ghost of Tsushima comes out July 17th. I don't know that I'm going to get this right out of the gates. I might wait for reviews to come out. What do you think? And I know we keep talking about this, but this is a exclusive PlayStation exclusive game, and I just wondered where you were at. I know that you weren't very interested at first, and then we got the Ghost of Tsushima information dropped, and we saw some more info in the game. And you said it kind of did pique your interest a little bit, and then we played The Last of Us Part 2, and now you're doing the palate cleanser. Are you going to sit on this for a bit before you pick it up? Are you going to pick it up? Are you thinking day one now, or where are we at now that we are a week away from this, Jake?
I'm going to also wait for reviews to come out, but reviews come out 3 days before. I think it's 3 days before the games come out is when the embargo lifts. So we should have a good idea of what, the game is like in terms of its quality and everything before it launches. So if everyone comes out and they're like, yeah, this is fucking awesome, this is great, blah, 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 then maybe I'll pick it up at launch day. The only reason why I was a little bit, we'll say,
apprehensive,
lukewarm or apprehensive about it, is just because the type of game and everything. It's like, well, I've played a million open world action games. I haven't heard anything about this game to make me like really itch for it. I mean, the content is interesting. But even, the samurai the samurai aesthetic or story base is something that is not new anymore. I mean, you have Nioh, you have Sekiro, you have all these other games. So like Ninja Gaiden historically, obviously that's a ninja game, but it's still in the same kind of like universe, like the same kind of aesthetic. So like I'm optimistic about it. It'll really depend on how I feel on Friday, assuming all the reviews come out and they're good. If the reviews come out and everybody's happy about it, then we'll see how I feel on Friday. I may pick it up on launch day, or I may be still a little bit worn out after playing The Last of Us. We'll see. That's a few days from now, so we'll see.
Interesting. Well, Jake, I know that we're all the hubbub is about Ghost of Tsushima and The Last of Us and the Ubisoft stuff. But what I really want to tell you all about is y'all are sleeping on probably what's going to take the video game world by storm. There is a hidden game that nobody knows has been in development probably for a super long time. And it's actually being published by, let me see here, Maximum Games, who's known for the Warhammer Chaos Bane games, the Mutant Year Zero, Road to Eden, Plague Tale Innocence, Greedfall. They're the publisher for all these games. There's another game that they're publishing that I have not heard any other gaming podcasts or any other gaming websites even talk about. And I think it's an oversight on their part. And I just want the world to know that my new game of the year, without knowing anything about it, is G.I. Joe Operation Blackout. So there you go.
There's probably a reason why nobody's heard anything about this game.
Nope.
It's probably a sleeper hit. It's either a sleeper hit or it's going to be a piece of shit. Or it's going to be so mediocre that nobody even notices it. Like every other G.I. Joe thing that's ever come out.
Shush! It's set for October. Set for an October 13th release. So if you are a listener of the show and you're a news listener or you're an old listener, you know that I'm a huge G.I. Joe fan. I'm such a fanboy. It's ridiculous, but there is something strange going on in the world of G.I. Joe. They were set to release a Snake Eyes movie that had production halted due to the coronavirus that was set to release around October time. And I'm thinking this game might have been part of that movie. I'm not certain. We all know Snake Eyes has a black outfit. This is called Operation Blackout. There was promotional advertisement back in 1988 that was mailed out by Hasbro direct to their mailing list, which was presumably addresses of people who had ordered from before, and it just says Operation Blackout on that. That's from 88. And they gave you a code, and you could check the code to get a free G.I. Joe poster, and it looks awesome. So they're using that. So I think there might be a little love to the franchise if they're calling this game Operation Blackout, and it ties back to a 1988 promotional advertisement that was mailed by Hasbro back in the day. Then I think this might be the G.I. Joe game I've been waiting for. We know all the G.I. Joe games up to date have sucked. They did do a skin on a G.I. Joe game, or on a Final Fight game they made for like G.I. Joe characters. It was pretty cool. But just so the listeners know that the Australian Classifications, which is the official government body for film and entertainment rating, and the granddaddy of major video game title leaks, is listing a brand new entry. This comes from histank.com for a console game based on the G.I. Joe franchise, titled G.I. Joe Operation Blackout. The game is rated M for violence. Yeah, you read that right. That's M. But it's different in Australia. M just means that it's not, completely clean. The listing also, this is coming right from the histank.com. The listing also denotes the publisher as Maximum Games, and you can check out more info about the new game after the jump. And it says the classification date was June 25th, 2020. It's been made 2020. Consumer advice is it's violence. Says, doesn't say who the developer is, which is what's interesting. So I don't know who's developing this game. Any ideas, Jake? They do say that it's going to be $39.99.
It's probably being developed by some third-rate developer. That's why they're not even announcing it. Unless like it's one of those things where it's still in pre-production or something like that. But you made it sound like it was coming out sometime this year.
October, man. October 13th. Yeah, it's going to be awesome,
so it's
whatever it is.
Developed by like Shithouse Video Games, and we'll see.
Don't fail me. If this game sucks, I'm going to be so disappointed. I just want to play a damn G.I. Joe game that is half decent, that has the characters I know and love. But anyways, yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there because I thought it was funny. But keep your eyes peeled. Operation Blackout, Game of the Year, calling it now. Jake, we're going to get into The Last of Us Part 2 spoiler now. So if the listeners have not played this game, and if you think you're ever going to play this game, you probably should turn off the podcast now and join us again next week for episode 147. We're going to talk heavily about this game, and we're going to not be spoiler free, which means we're going to be talking about specific things of the game, and we're going to bring up some comments. So if you haven't played the game, go play the game. You can come back and revisit this episode and join us here later and listen to this part of it. But we do need to get this out of the way. We're probably like the last PlayStation podcast that is going to talk about this game. Everybody has talked about it. The developers, the voice actors, everybody has been involved in all kinds of information about this game. And I just want to say that I'm glad that we didn't rush into it, and I'm glad you got to take your time with it. And I'm excited to hear. We haven't really had many conversations about this game yet, even off air. So I'm excited to hear. So what I put on here, I kind of had some bullet points. I did kind of recount some story beats, but let's start off with your overall impression, Jake. What's your overall impression of The Last of Us Part 2?
Do you want me to tell you my overall impression of everything, how I feel about it? Or do you want me to just say it's good or bad?
Generally speaking, good or bad. Then we're going to get into complaints. We're going to get into praises. And then we're going to talk about some specific story beats and maybe get into some deeper conversations about where they went with the story. But your overall impression, like maybe give it, we don't do ratings really on the show, but like if you're going to give it like a 0 to 10 on a scale, where would it fall? I'm trying not to say compare it with the first Last of Us, because as a musician, it drives me crazy when people are like, it's a good record, but it's not as good as the first one. But I mean, it's all relative. I guess where this game is a standalone game, where are you at on it?
So the way that I feel about it is that I think that it is objectively a good game. It has objectively even a great game. It has some issues that I have some issues with it that are probably, I don't know, they might be subjective, but I feel like some of the issues I have with it are objective issues. But if I was to rate it like you're talking about, I would say The Last of Us Part 2 probably deserves somewhere in the neighborhood of like an 8 out of 10. I think that if you look at reviews online, you're going to get two things. You're going to get 10 out of 10s and you're going to get 5 out of 10s. You're not going to get anything in the middle because this game has been really polarizing to the industry.
It's divisive. Yeah.
I don't think it deserves 5 out of 10s. I think they're being too hard on it. But I definitely don't think it deserves these fucking numbers and numbers of 10 out of 10s that they're getting. I don't understand where they're pulling this from. We can talk about that later. If you want to give my just kind of bullet point impression, it's that I think it's a great game. Probably like around a 7 or an 8 out of 10. It has some flaws, but it's definitely an experience worth having.
When it comes to Naughty Dog games, because you and I both really enjoy Naughty Dog, and I'll give you my overall impression here in a minute, but I'm going to ask you this. We have all these Naughty Dog games that you and I love, the Uncharted series. We like the first Last of Us, the Last of Us Part 2. They did the Jak and Daxter stuff. Where does this fall if you were to rate it on the Naughty Dog list of achievements and games that they've made? Like, would you say it's their third best game, second best, fourth best? Where does it fall in ranking with the Uncharted games?
I would say that if I had to say where it ranks in the pantheon of Naughty Dog games, I would say probably third. If I had to guess. Now, this is just literally me pulling this out of my ass right now, but I would say the best game they've ever made is still the first Last of Us game. The second best game they've ever made is Uncharted 3. And the third best game is probably The Last of Us Part 2. And
Uncharted 3?
Just me literally without
impressive.
thinking about it at all. Yeah, that's probably what I would say without thinking about it at all. Just thinking about, because to me, I'm thinking about like the way that the game impacted me when I played it, the accomplishment of the game itself, the story that was involved, the way that I enjoyed it, how I enjoyed playing it. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I would put it. I would say that you could technically maybe flip Uncharted 3 and The Last of Us Part 2 and say that The Last of Us Part 2 is the second best game they've ever made. I think that as much as I really like The Last of Us, there's something to be said about what the Uncharted games really do as far as entertainment factor. Because, you could say that The Last of Us Part 2 is the best game that Naughty Dog ever made if you're talking about it purely from an art perspective. Like as an art piece that like has a message to say and invokes emotions and all this stuff, you would definitely say Uncharted The Last of Us Part 2 is the best game that Naughty Dog has ever made. The problem is we're judging video games. And yeah, video games are art and the lines are blurred and all that kind of crap. But at the end of the day, you still have to play it. So there are some aspects of that which hold it back from that number 1 or possibly number 2 spot for me.
Yeah. All right. Fair enough. Yeah. My overall impressions of the game is I'm a little darker of a person than you are, Jake. I think the game resonated with me really, really well. We have a lot of games that are just kind of fun and action packed, fun adventures. And we have a lot of games that are, look like Fortnite, or they look like Borderlands, and they're very video gamey games. This is the first game that I've played that just felt realistic. And it felt, there's definitely a skin on this game of just a depressed world, a gloomy world. The game doesn't make you feel great about anything. There are moments, I think we talked on the last show, there are moments where you can get a glimpse of a better life or happiness for the characters, but it's always kind of painted in some sort of overarching sadness. You're really stuck in this world for a very long time, and it's gloomy, and I can't say that the game was fun. I would say that the game is riveting, and it definitely has a story to tell. So if I had to give it on a 1 to 10 or 0 to 10, I don't think this game is for everybody, and I've heard that a lot of places. I think it definitely was good for me. I like to read dark books, like the Cormac McCarthy books. I like to read about despair and people, and I write sad songs. I kind of gravitate towards the morose and towards the darker aspects of life, unfortunately. And there's something about it that resonated really well with me. And I did like, it's the first time in video games that I ever experienced a perspective shift, the way that they pulled it off in this game. Some people were upset about it. I just think that it worked as best as it could have. And I thought it was really brave of them to do that. So my overall impression, I would give it probably because they didn't really, they did break new ground with this game, with the accessibility options and how big the game was, and the art, like you said, the art direction, like it was just phenomenal. The graphics were great. All the animations looked so realistic. They broke a lot of ground. The voice acting, terrific. The story, terrific. But the more I think about it, like there was very little gameplay in this game. It was very kind of rinse and repeat as far as the encounters. There were some puzzles, but we'll get to that. But I kind of feel like there wasn't a whole lot of invention with this game. There wasn't that there wasn't. It didn't feel like a graduation to a next level thing in the perspective of gameplay. You can go prone. Everything looks smoother. Everything seems to play smoother. Whatever. I don't know that I give it a 10. I definitely would give it a 9. I don't know that I'm at a 10 just because I don't think it was creative enough. I think they put a lot of emphasis on the story and they made the game they wanted to make. But I mean, a 9 is still out of this world as far as I'm concerned. We're pretty critical of games. I think, I don't know, man. That's kind of where I'm at with an overall impression. And we still haven't seen what they're cooking up for the online. I think they're still working on a multiplayer part of this game or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that the multiplayer thing, the factions thing, is going to be its own. It'll either be like maybe some free downloadable content if you own the game, or it's going to be like its own game. They made it sound like it was going to be its own game altogether. So yeah, that'll be kind of interesting to see how that pans out. But what you were saying kind of goes back to what I was mentioning before about how, like, if you were judging this game based on a piece of art, it would be far and away the best thing that the industry has to offer. But if you're talking about it from a gameplay perspective, it does nothing new, like, at all. They kind of tweak the systems in the game a little bit from The Last of Us Part 1, but to me, the tweaks that they made, it's like this shit that they tweak from, like, between seasons in Destiny. You know what I mean? It's not like it wasn't like a fundamental shift like you would see to like a sequel of a video game where they're like, right, breaking new ground, or at least trying to come up and be creative with new gameplay options. The only thing that they did was they made it so that you could go prone, and they
stealth a little,
I guess, maybe beefed up or shored up or changed up a little bit, like the upgrade system in it, but you're still like popping pills to upgrade your character, and you're still like finding parts gears and using workbenches to upgrade your weapons. Like, yeah, like it's still the gameplay itself, with the exception of being able to go prone and maybe a couple of extra skill trees, is identical to the first game. There's literally no difference. And arguably, like, some of the stuff that they did change up a little bit, I would prefer it was the way it used to be. Like, if you're talking about the listen mode or whatever, like they nerfed the listen mode, so you have to like upgrade it and shit to be able to have it be as good as it was in the first game. Is effective. It's just like, why? Like, the game is hard enough. I played it on normal the first time through, like the standard difficulty. And I struggled at first, like, especially with some of those like clicker sections, especially like that part where you get into like that room and it's just full of fucking stalkers and you can't find them in listen mode anyway. And then whenever they like gang up on you and shit. Now, I will say there's one positive about that, is that the AI is fucking awesome in this game. The enemies talk to each other. They flank you and shit. They make comments about each other when they're killed. Like, it's very immersive. Like, the AI, the enemies are all very good in this game. Yeah. But as far as like the way the moment to moment gameplay, there's very little that's different. I mean, you're still, jumping through like filing cabinets and shit, trying to find random bottles of alcohol and all this stuff. And crafting is exactly the same almost. Abby has some abilities that are kind of cool where you can craft ammo and shit like that. Yeah, I mean, gameplay wise, there isn't really much different.
Yeah, it does a lot of. This game is clearly focused on story. I don't think that there wasn't much creative as far as any of the combat, or if you want to call them arenas. The one thing that I thought was really good about the first game, if I'm being honest, I think this might be the first Naughty Dog game where you're not getting chased and the camera reverses. Does that happen in this game? A chase scene where you're running towards the camera? I don't think that
happens in the first Last of Us either.
Yeah, it does. Doesn't it? It does briefly.
No, it doesn't. Where does it happen in The Last of Us Part 1?
In Pittsburgh.
I just played that game before I played Part 2, and I don't remember that at all.
Doesn't it happen with that armored vehicle in Pittsburgh? No, it happens at the very beginning.
It happens like
Doesn't it happen at the very
avoiding it.
beginning when you're running from the zombies with your first daughter? Doesn't it pan around briefly when you get out of the car?
No, it doesn't go to that trail like that Uncharted fucking camping movie.
I was thinking
movie
it did.
view like they do in Uncharted.
Fair enough.
I mean,
Fair enough.
but there is some like chasey kind of runaway scenes for sure.
Yeah. Well, so what I was kind of getting at was in this game, like there's the first Last of Us, there were some interesting combat scenarios. There's one where Joel gets tripped up and he goes upside down and you're hanging upside down and it fucks up your perspective and you're trying to shoot people that are trying to get Ellie. There's that. I think there's one or two other interesting combat scenarios in the first Last of Us that kind of mix it up a little bit. And the only one I can really think of in The Last of Us Part 2 would be the one where you're in the marina and you can dive underwater and resurface. That's really, but like we get a lot of that in Uncharted 4 when you are diving in and around the ships, or maybe that's Uncharted 3 with the pirate ships, not the pirate ships, but I don't know who they are. You know what I'm talking about. Uncharted 3, that scene where you have to keep diving underwater and resurfacing and shooting the bad guys. The marina scene felt a lot like that to me because the marina was really tough, like as Ellie.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. You're talking about when you're in that mall section where it's before you get the boat. And you're
that's not the marina.
And
that's
diving under the water and popping up. And all that. No, that's before you get there. I'll be honest with you. I struggled way less with those scenes and those sequences than I did with any of the clicker shit. Like for whatever reason, all the clicker stuff, was way more difficult to me than most of the human on human interaction. Yeah. I felt like, because typically I felt like I could more easily outsmart the bad guys. Now, I will say that one of the things that disappointed me about this game, and I don't necessarily think that it's a negative, it's just kind of disappointing, is that they give you like all these really great stealth mechanics and they make it so that you can sneak around or whatever, but they more often than not put you in a situation where you end up having to fucking kill everybody anyway because it's just almost impossible to sneak through them. Like maybe if you were a master player, you could sneak through everybody, but this is on the normal difficulty. This isn't on like the hardest difficulty or whatever. Right. It's like on the normal difficulty, it's almost fucking impossible to sneak through everyone. It just
I ran into that.
Now, part of that is because the enemy AI is so good, but it's just like 9 times out of 10, what ended up happening was I had to just start killing people and just peeling them off and killing them and peeling them off and killing them. There wasn't really an option for me to be non-lethal without being like the world's greatest bottle thrower. You know what I mean? And even then, it's like you end up attracting enemies to yourself more often than not. So it's mostly like the stalkers and shit where it's like, you can't melee them or anything. You have to like shoot them and you can't sneak up on them to kill them like you can the regular clickers. Yeah. And then it's like, I got to fucking unload my shot. It's almost like they put stalkers in an area where they're like, let's get rid of some of their ammo. Like you've been storing too much ammo, so we're going to get rid of some of it. So here's some stalkers. And then,
that's why
it's kind of like a way for them to like artificially adjust your ammo content, which is, I guess, a way of curbing, like making it more difficult or whatever.
Oh, I was just going to say, before we get into praises, since we're kind of talking about the stuff we're not happy with, let's just go through some complaints. So keep going. Let's talk about some complaints about the game. I think that's kind of where we started anyways, but that was on my list here.
So I'll just get it out of the way and I'll give you my cardinal fucking complaint about this game. And it is a big reason why this is like an 8 out of 10 as opposed to a 10 out of 10. And it's because they violate the cardinal sin for me when it comes to gaming nowadays. And it's that this game at times just does not respect my time. Like there is like, as much as I believe that the story needed to be told and a lot of the shit for the story needed to be there and everything, and then it was going to be a long game to begin with or whatever. But there was probably 5 or 6 hours of this game that didn't need to be there. Like extended gameplay sequences where you have to fight your way through seemingly fucking 50 guys for no reason to accomplish some minute task. A lot of this shit like didn't really progress the story. It was just like, we're writing this story heavy game. We got to put some gameplay in. Let's just throw this section in where you got to kill 1,000 fucking people. And it's like, you know, I would much rather there be very little gameplay and just have them kind of push you from story beat to story beat and have the gameplay sections actually mean things. Because like in this game, what ended up happening is you do all these big gameplay sections and you have to kill all of these bad guys with all these limited resources. And then they just totally fucking kick you in the dick the whole time while you're doing it, because it's like, oh, you can't pick up their weapons. Oh, you can't pick up their ammo. You fight a guy that has infinite ammo, but as soon as you kill him, he's got one bullet in his pocket. Okay, that makes no fucking sense. It's like there's a lot of little shit like that about the way that the game is played that they just kind of put in there to make the game longer, that I'm just like, or more difficult, which inherently makes the game longer, that was just driving me crazy. There are seriously points in this game where I like Sarah and I were playing it, and I would get to a section where it was like, I knew it was going to be another fucking 2-hour battle with a bunch of guys. And I was just like, I don't want to play this game anymore. And I would just like put it down and I would wait and come back to it the next day, because it's like, I don't have, you know, like I want to know what happens in the story. In The Last of Us Part 1, it was like every single piece of gameplay in that game furthered the story. It had a point. It progressed. It was very linear. It pushed the story further. In this game, it's like, you know, really intense, really awesome story beat, a bunch of random fucking gameplay that you don't care about just so you can pick up shit and read notes and stuff. Awesome gameplay story thing. And I think part of that was them trying to open it up a little bit, or I mean, I don't know. Maybe they were reaching a little bit too far with it. I'm not sure. I don't know if you share my opinion at all, but there was definitely points in the game where I was just like, this needs to fucking stop. Like as far as like the gameplay stuff. And like to give you like a prime example of shit that they did with the gameplay of this, where I was just like literally screaming at my television, was like, you know, was the scene in the fucking hospital when you're playing as Abby and you have to fight that fucking like amalgamation of like bodies that were all together. It's like somebody at Naughty Dog literally was like, you know, I was at home playing Resident Evil 2 last night, and I thought it would be awesome for us to just have a fucking Resident Evil 2 boss fight right in the middle of this Uncharted or Last of Us game. It's like, come on. I was so fucking disappointed that they put that in there. It makes no sense. It doesn't match up with the rest of the gameplay at all. And it was hard. It was hard as fuck. And they put that in there like, I don't know. It wasn't necessary. Like if you didn't want me to have all this extra ammo and shit, like you could have made that section just filled with clickers and stuff. And then it would have made more sense because they set it up where they're like, oh, that's one of the oldest sections that was like the first infected and all this shit. And you're like, oh, so I'm going to find some nasty down here. Yeah. And you get down there and it's like this fucking thing that doesn't make any sense compared to everything else you've seen in the game so far. It's like, okay, the Shamblers are new for this game, but at least they kind of fit the mold as far as the evolution of the clickers are concerned, the infection of the fungus or whatever. But this fucking thing that you fight is like, it's like I said, it's like something out of Resident Evil. It's like some mad scientist fucking stitched a bunch of clickers together and we're like, here you go, fight this thing. And then like you kill it a little bit and like one of them peels off and starts killing you from the side. It's like, come on. Yeah. This isn't like an action game. It's a stealth game. You know what I mean? Like it's a stealth horror survival, like kind of actiony kind of game.
It was kind of
like
weird.
This random ass like, I mean, I don't know if you agree with me at all. I'm sorry to go off on a rant about that one particular section, but it was just like a prime example of them just like shoehorning shit into the gameplay portions of this game because they had so much story. It felt like to me, they're like, oh, we have so much story. I think someone said they have like 10 or 11 hours of cinematics or something, which is crazy. But it's like they've got all this story. They're like, well, we got to make a game, like put all this fucking gameplay shit in there. And it's like they just shoveled it in. And, you know, there's some stuff, like typically I'm not a big fan of just shoehorning open world sections in, but like that open world part at the beginning of the game when you're with Dina and you're going around like the streets of Seattle trying to find some information about the wolves. I really enjoyed that section because you wander around. Every building that you can go into has some meaningful story content in the form of notes or artifacts or whatever. And the buildings that don't have that stuff usually have some sort of like special weapon or upgrade or whatever. Then, they did that. And then that was the last time you did that, the entire fucking game. They just threw it out the window. So like there was no other open worldy kind of like self-reflection kind of points the rest of the game. I would much rather have them replaced 60% of the fucking combat in the game with sections like that open world part where I can kind of run around, fight a few guys here and there, but it's like a reflective kind of atmosphere. The scene where you play Take On Me to Dina with the guitar and like all that shit amazing. Like serves the story. But like the shit where you're just like, well, I got to sneak through this town, I guess, and kill fucking 50 guys because apparently there's a military guarding this house that serves no purpose. And, it's just like, I mean, I'm sorry to go on a rant a little bit. And trust me, like, I know that I'm getting fired up about this particular part of the game. I did really like the game, but
well, this is the complaint
so taken
section
out of my experience with the game. But yeah, it's just like, and the way that if you want to use video game critic or video game review terminology, the way that you would say it is that this game has shit pacing. And it's not always shit, but a lot of times it has really up and down, just all over the place pacing. Where you'll have these like great story beats, and the game is moving along really well, and then you'll just have these dead spots where it's just like some shit, And usually it's in the form of like a combat sequence where I got to spend 3 hours sneaking around these guys or whatever, and then they kind of fucked up the story a little bit in my regard, where they made, in terms of the pacing, where they have all these sections where it's like with Ellie especially, at the beginning of the game where you and Dina get to the theater, and then it's like, okay, we got to the theater. Now it's like, go out and kill this guy, then come back to the theater, go out and handle that guy, come back to the theater, go out and talk to this person, come back to the theater. And it's just like it's not, I mean, it all moves the story forward, but it's got this like weird, what do you call those, hub world kind of feels to it. Yeah. Where it's like, you've got in this thing going on at the theater where Dina's got to stay there because she's fucking pregnant, apparently. I don't know. I get it, but there was a lot of times where the story, and I know that Neil Druckmann did this on purpose and the writers did this on purpose, but there was a lot of elements of the story and where like it really pissed me off because it made all of the shit that I was just talking about, where I had to fight through 30,000 fucking people and sneak through all this shit and travel all these places and play for 10 fucking hours. And then the story makes it literally like you wasted your time. And like the characters feel that and they're upset about that and it serves the story. But as a player, it makes me literally want to fucking break my controller in half. Not because I feel for the story characters and feel for their loss or whatever, but because I feel like my time was personally wasted on a gameplay perspective.
That's funny.
It might sound like I'm being a little bit harsh about it, but it's like, I feel like if they could have made this game with the perspective switch and everything, they could have pared this down, given you the same like awesome story and everything. They didn't even have to change a whole lot about it. And they could have got it around the 20-hour mark. And it would have been perfect. It would have moved right along. The story would have hit so much harder because it wouldn't have been like super emotional moment where like I'm literally tearing up and stuff. And then like the next 6 hours is me wanting to snap my controller because I can't sneak through all these guys. And then they serve you like this story moment that makes you tear up again and brings you back in. And it's just, I don't know if you share any of those feelings, Fred. I'm ranting, but that's kind of like, that's my biggest complaint about this game.
Yeah. I'm just letting you go because of the gap in the connection between the two of us. I didn't want to start saying something and have you stop your rant. I wanted to hear your rant. I didn't want you to pause. But yeah, so what is that noise? Jeez.
Sorry, it's my air conditioner.
No, you're good.
Hopefully it doesn't
anyways,
fuck it up too much. I can turn it off if I have to. It's just hot.
No, you're fine. What I was saying, you're getting all hot talking about what you're upset about. So the complaints, man, I agree partially with you. I think that Naughty Dog didn't have a clear direction when they started this game. I think that's why there's a good portion in the beginning that's open world. I remember hearing an interview with Neil Druckmann and the person who they brought in to help co-write the game, that their initial thought was to make the game entirely open world. So they probably dumped tons of time and resources into that whole area. And then we're like, you know what? This is going to be too hard to do with the story we're trying to tell, but let's not get rid of all this. Let's keep all the artwork. Let's keep this whole map layout, and let's just turn it into something we can use. So I think that's why that never returns. My guess is that part was made very early on, and they just turn it into a fetch quest to find gas. And you get to go explore all those cool little dungeons, those mini dungeons, whatever. So I can kind of understand with a game that's in development for 7 years. I'm kind of impressed with how glued together it does feel, considering that some of this stuff was probably pretty much done in the first couple years. The thing that bothered me about the game, there were parts of the stealth, like they get like you kind of like what you touched on earlier, like the stealth in the game works, but you're kind of going to end up in these huge battles regardless. And the stealth thing kind of frustrated me because I wanted to be stealthy, and I would go prone and I would start, and it's like, well, if you're in the grass and they get close enough, they're going to know that it's you. But the shitty thing is you can only crawl so fast, and there's never grass that goes the whole way around the outside of a map. So if somebody gets too close to you, and there's no stealth takedown from prone position as far as I know, so you'd have to stand up to reveal yourself, or you could shoot them from the ground, but you don't get the silencer until later in the game. So a lot of your weapons at the beginning of the game aren't suppressed. So if you get into that situation, there's really no way to stealth your way around it. You have to crouch. You get in the crouch mode to try to do a takedown. And then by the time, sometimes they see you and they alert the other people. And the AI's really smart. Then they find you. And then it's like you can go run and hide like in Uncharted 4 and just wait for them to kind of like subside. And then be like, they must have got away. And then you can try to like work your way around it again. But that takes forever just to die to restart the encounter. So yeah, essentially I did the same thing as you did. Is I would try to stealth. I could realize that I couldn't do it. And then I would just try to kill everybody. And the majority of the time I was able to be pretty successful in doing that. But then once everybody's dead, you have this really amazing piece of game map to explore and pick up notes and pick up parts. But then you're just like on to the next little chunk of it. And then it was a lot of that again over and over. That's why I kind of said in the beginning, like there wasn't a whole lot as far as gameplay that kept my interest, but it was the story that kept me playing for sure. I was always excited to get like a new scope, to craft a new scope, or to get like a new weapon, or to get the bow and arrow, or to get the crossbow as Abby, I was excited to get that stuff and try it out. But again, like because ammo is so scarce, that I felt like I didn't really use the awesome weapons often because I didn't want to run out of ammo because I didn't know what they were going to throw at me. So it was like the thing that I fall into with RPGs is like I end up with like 100 health potions by the time I beat the game, and I don't ever use them. I just keep buying them, and like, using my cure abilities instead of drinking the potions when I'm in dire need. And then I just end up beating a game with all these resources. But they did drain your resources. I think that the dogs were not necessary in this game at all. The only reason that I feel like they at all will be necessary is because of the dog that you're later forced to kill as Ellie. You come back around and you play as Abby, and they create an emotional attachment to that dog. And you're like, oh shit, I killed this dog as Ellie. Damn it. But like the dogs were like, I think they were just put in there to pull at your heartstrings, man. The only purpose the dogs truly served in this game was to make you emotional. It wasn't because they added much to the gameplay. I mean, the dogs could sniff you out, sure, but if you killed their owner quietly, they would just like weep and cry next to their downed owner. And people are like, what's the matter, Bucky, or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, and I think the dogs were kind of pointless. I mean, it's a nice little touch. Sure. I mean, we're complaining that they didn't do anything to like upgrade the game. And I think part of the reason why they call it Last of Us Part 2 is because it's not The Last of Us 2. Like, it's not Uncharted Part 2 or Uncharted Part 3. They called it Part 2 because they knew it was an extension of the first game. As far, they weren't really reinventing the wheel here. And that's kind of consistent, I believe, with the way they titled the game. I know, Jake, that you were getting also tired of the amount of time it took to search for everything. But just so you know, if you ever go back and play it again, there is something in the accessibility option where you as a character can just press a button and it'll ping everything in that room that you can collect, which is kind of cool. So you don't have to go search the rooms or the areas that are just going to be empty cabinets. So that's kind of nice. And another complaint that I had, you would think after Uncharted 1 that Naughty Dog weren't ever going to revisit water travel. And the boat sections, like that boat handled so shitty. Like it kind of bothered me. This is a complaint that I have. It did handle better than a jet ski in Uncharted, but it was still annoying to move that thing around. I guess I get it because geography wise, like the water was in Seattle and running through Seattle, and you needed to get around the water or whatever. It added a little bit of different traversal. They had a horse and then you could walk and then you could, get in the boat. But I'm glad that the boat stuff didn't last any longer. I actually had the game crash on me one time, and it was when I was in the boat, and I did not go back to playing it that night. As soon as it crashed, I was done. Like, I just didn't want to go back to it because it happened on one of the boat scenes where you're like bridging into the next little area and you kind of come off this drop off on the boat, and the screen just went black. And I was like, well, I guess I'm restarting. I hope it did save my progress, but
yeah, the boat thing is interesting because there is an alternative boat control scheme, and I just enabled that, and it allows you to use like standard controls where you like hold R2 down for throttle, and then you just kind of control the left and right with the joystick like a regular car control in a video game. So I didn't use that bullshit default control that they give you. I was like, because as soon as I started playing that, Sarah was sitting with me, and I was like, whoa, this is bad. This is really bad. And she was like, because she was looking at the game on her own, because there's all these accessibility options, and my wife is fucking terrible at video games, but she's interested in the stories. So she was like, I think there's enough accessibility options that I could tailor this game enough that I could even play it myself, because she can't do the aiming and all that kind of stuff. And so she looked through all the accessibility options, and she was like, just so you know, there is a way that you can change the controls for the boats in there. And I went in there and I changed it, and it's way better. It controlled way better. Now the boat still handled kind of weird. Like, it doesn't handle like a real boat, but it controlled like a video game boat should control. I agree with what you're saying about like the combat sections and everything and being able to run away. And I think that putting the dogs in the game was just a fucking low blow, personally. I don't think there was a point there. Like, I agree with you. It was like they literally just put them in there and like, I don't know if you've watched any interviews with Neil Druckmann and stuff, but he's literally come out and said like, this game is meant to make you feel bad, period, full stop. Right. And like, it's obviously more complicated than that. He has a message, and there's especially some messaging, the ideas behind the cycle of violence, and that's kind of like the whole point of the story and everything. The dog things, it's like when you're as Ellie, all you're doing is killing these dogs and feeling bad about it. And when you're as Abby, you're like playing with them and like doing all this stuff that like, makes you feel good about dogs and shit. And it's just, does it serve the story at all? I mean, other than the one sequence with, I can never remember the name of the older sister, Lev's older sister. There's a sequence with her where, you're throwing the toy and the dog brings it back and everything. And it kind of adds a little bit of something to that section. Yeah, no, Yara is what her name is.
Yara, sorry.
Now that you say that, I remember her real name. It's Yara, yeah. But like, I feel like they could have left the dogs in all of the Abby stuff, but just like left them out of the Ellie shit. And I guess maybe it kind of wouldn't make sense because in the Abby shit, they're taking dogs out with them on patrol and stuff. Yeah. And you would imagine as Ellie, you would run into them. Mm-hmm. But, you could have like left most of them out and had the dogs just be fucking pets. And I don't know. It's it's weird. It was like one of those things that they did specifically to just fuck with your brain. And,
well, there's that dichotomy,
that's what
right?
Most of this game was like,
the dichotomy between the two characters that you play as in this game. I mean, that's the big thing. It shifts your perspective on like that. Nobody's necessarily good in this game. I mean, Joel had a bad past, and he killed the doctor at the end of The Last of Us Part 1. That turns out being Abby's dad. Abby's on a mission for revenge. Kills Joel, which turns Ellie into a mission of revenge, and then she goes and kills Abby's friends, and then they meet up by the end of the game, and I think the message is great. I think that I identified a lot with just like it touches on a whole lot more, and there's a lot of nuance to it, especially there's a lot of metaphor and literal things that occur in the game. The one thing that Joel gave Ellie was kind of going to the story beats. We'll get to that, but like it is like the guitar, and he kind of taught her how to play and stuff. And then, he ends up dying. It's like the one thing that she was left with. And then she tried to seek revenge for his death. And I think if Joel was around at that point, he seems like he cooled down. He probably would have had that conversation with her. Listen, man, it's not worth it. Don't get yourself killed over me. If anything, I owe you an apology. Don't go out. But she does. She can't help it, and she tries to find closure through violence, and it ends up resulting in her losing her fucking fingers, and then she can't fucking even play guitar well anymore. And it's like the one gift that he had given her that could essentially have lasted her lifetime. Is the enjoyment of music and the ability to enjoy playing guitar. And so, I mean, that whole thing was a great story beat and a crazy lesson, and I thought that was done really well. So let's move on to praises. And speaking of guitar, Jake, I'll start off with the praises. The guitar playing in this game is awesome. There's all kinds of people who are playing music on the in-game guitar and actually doing cover songs. What I wanted to do was kind of play one of my original songs and like record it and then go into Logic and then do like recorded vocals over top of it just to see what it would sound like, and then put a video of me singing and Ellie playing, and do like maybe a video of me doing like a second guitar part on top of their guitar. Like, how fucking cool would that be? That'd be cool as shit. But that was a pretty cool feature in the game. The voice acting is hands down amazing. I didn't have any issue with any of the acting, any motion capture, any of that. I think it's all amazing. The world building is incredible. The notes you pick up, even though it gets a little mundane, there are cool little anecdotes and stories in there. And the visual art style, everything looks so realistic. It's a glum world. The storms look great. The water looked great. Everything, character models, concept art, all that stuff, just fantastic. This list could actually pretty much go on forever. But two of the things that they did do that I really liked about the gameplay I had on here was that there's actually a dodge button finally. So when people come up to melee, you can dodge. That was one of the well-received additions to the game that I really enjoyed and appreciated. And then the prone thing was nice, but I didn't find myself going prone as often as I wanted. The only time I really found myself in the prone position was when I got shot and it blew me off my feet and I was on my back. I didn't really go prone unless I was trying to stealth, but that didn't last very long. So it's not like I would run and go prone and try to hide from people. I would go prone to start the stealth, and then I would get caught, and then I would just go balls out and shoot people. But the story, praise the story, fabulous story, great story. Like you said, it plays on your emotions. They intentionally made the game the way they did. As far as the length of the game, I guess it's debatable. We're all our own people. I didn't mind the length of the game myself. I think I appreciated it definitely when I got to the end of it. And it did seem long-winded when you get to that middle section where Abby and Ellie first meet after Joel gets killed and they're in the theater. And then it cuts to Abby and it's like Seattle Day One. I'm like, oh my God, we're going to do this whole thing again, but is Abby and her story. And it was like, man, I don't really even want to do this because like I'm kind of tired of the game because it doesn't put you in a good place. But then I gravitate towards the morose, like I said. So I was in. I wanted to see one of the things that I really enjoyed about Abby's sequence of stories was I did enjoy the Seraphite stuff because the lighting was always really cool with the flames and stuff, and their whistling. Their whistling was almost a straight takeaway from The Walking Dead. There were some things like even the death scene of Joel was very much akin to the death scene of Glenn in the Walking Dead TV show. Very, very much like it. And they borrowed a lot from a lot of things, I think. And Naughty Dog, I think, has been known to borrow things from other things that they've been influenced by, and they kind of tweak it and turn it into their own thing. And it was effective. I did like the Seraphite stuff when you're Abby, and that cutscene specifically where Abby gets strung up to be hanged was a very long cutscene, and it starts her journey with Lev and Yara. And the one thing that I really liked about Abby's story was, like, from a situational and environmental standpoint, was a lot of the climbing to taking the bridges and stuff up on the tower. That felt like, okay, I'm in a fucking new location. Like, I kind of enjoyed that shit. Like, a lot of the game, although it was artistically good and conceived well, like, a lot of it looked and felt like the same shit. And, broken buildings, overgrowth. And I welcome the scenes where there was snow. I welcome the scenes where there was a lot of mud. I welcome the water scenes, and I welcome, like, specifically when you're up there and you're doing some Uncharted shit up there with Abby. I really enjoyed the visuals and the height and when you're up in the clouds and stuff. I thought that was a really nice breath from everything else that I'd done in the game up until that point. So there's just so much good to say. Like I said, I'd probably give it a 9 out of 10 just because the game was a little long on the tooth, but I understand why they did it after listening to their interviews and stuff. They really wanted the player to feel as exhausted as the characters at the end. And we know that Abby's, like, emaciated and she's being crucified, and, Ellie's beat to shit. There's a scene where you see Ellie putting on a shirt. It's just a shot from behind her, and you see all of her bruises and all of her cuts and scratches and how dirty she fucking is. And it's just like, man, like, I kind of felt like I was right there with her at that point, because the game had already lasted so long. And it was just like, wow, yeah, man, this is a journey. The game felt like a journey. And I think that's what they wanted us to experience. So I don't blame them for it. I praise them for being kind of making the game they wanted to make. It didn't sit well with everybody, but as a whole, I really, really enjoyed it, and I don't regret buying it by any means. And I wouldn't give back a single second of playing the game, because it's one of those games that I think we're going to look back on and be like, that thing was a fucking masterpiece. I really think so, because I don't think we're going to get another game like it, man. I don't think we're ever going to get another game like this. I mean, it didn't feel like a game. It felt like you were in a book, or you're in, like, some sort of crazy story, like in a movie, and, like, you're just so invested emotionally. And I don't think we're going to get another game like this. I don't see it happening. And if Cormac McCarthy had developed or made a fucking video game, it would be The Last of Us Part 2. 100%. And, like, it was so good to play for me. I really enjoyed it. So, Jake, what do you have to praise? I mean, we're getting kind of long on the podcast. We're about an hour and a half in. But this is all I have left on the show. Why don't you talk about some of the stuff, because you did bring up a lot of complaints. Like, you did also say that you really enjoyed the story. But I think on the last show we were going to talk briefly about some of the things that you felt were politically motivated. If you want to get into those conversations, we can do that now. Or you want to talk about some praises first before you get into that, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have to really go too long about any of this. I just, obviously the big thing, as far as, like, the biggest things about the game that I think are positives about it, is that, the story is amazing. I mean, it's not the story that I would have chosen for The Last of Us Part 2, but I think that if, you take the story objectively for what it is, it's definitely, it definitely completes an artistic vision that draws emotions out of you, mostly bad, but it does draw emotions out of you. The visuals are great. The game plays, as far as, like, the actual controlling and everything, it plays a lot better than the first game does. So that's a positive. I liked a lot of the the notes and stuff that you come across, although that's sort of, rehash of the first game, but they continued it on in this one and it worked really good.
Were you impressed with the load times?
I thought that a lot of the load times, I felt like the load time, honestly, the fact that there's only one loading sequence is impressive. It's a little bit, it's like one of those things. It's like, do you want to have one really long load time or do you want to have a bunch of really short load times? And it's like, well, in The Last of Us Part 2, they opted for one longer load time. And it's like,
well, like when you die and you respawn.
I don't really care. I mean, to me, it doesn't. Oh, that's quick. That's fucking awesome. I mean, that's pretty impressive. I was more referring to like when you load into the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, the respawning stuff is nice and quick. It's really impressive. Like I mentioned already, the AI is really good in this game. I thought some of the characters were really good. Like I think Lev. It's a little bit of a slow burn at first, but once like Abby really gets into working with Lev's character, I think that Lev is a really strong character, and it seems like they're kind of setting up like a Lev and Abby kind of duo for maybe the next game or whatever. That said, there's a lot of characters in the game that I thought were like meh. You know what I mean? Like Dina, for example. I mean, she served a purpose, but she didn't
do much for me either.
Same with a lot of Abby's compatriots like Owen and, the pregnant chick, which, sidebar for a second. And I watched a lot of reviews about The Last of Us Part 2 because I needed something to help me kind of like gel my thoughts about the game, because it fucks up your brain so bad when you're done playing it. You need like time to think about it and to bounce opinions off of other people. And, like I was watching this one video review and they're like, this is part of the story that makes no fucking sense. You literally are in this barracks full of fucking guys with guns and shit like that. And, you've got a gym and all this shit. Why the fuck is like an 8-month pregnant person going with you on this patrol where you're going to be attacked by the scars? It's like it literally makes no sense for the story.
Mel, and,
right. Like, I mean, unless there's... Yeah, Mel, right? So, like, her character, I'm just like, dude, what the fuck is your problem? Like, why are you out here at all? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
The reason she went was because they wanted you to kill a pregnant person as Ellie and make you feel like shit. That's why she went. In the real world, like, she wouldn't have fucking gone.
Yeah.
It would have been stupid on her part. Or the other thing that maybe, I don't mean to cut you off, but the other thing I'm thinking either that all these people that were friends were all former Fireflies that integrated into the Wolves. So maybe they're buddies and friends from back in the day, and they just keep it tight and they keep together. That's one of the impressions I got, and she didn't want to be left out there with the Wolves.
Yeah, I get that. But it's like, it was just one of those things, like you just talked about killing a pregnant person as Ellie, and there's the flip side of it later. Where Abby almost kills Dina, and it's just like it's like a story move that is just so fucking telegraphed. It's not even funny. Like the reason that person is in there is to create this element where you have to be a shitty person and kill Mel, who's pregnant. Because otherwise, like otherwise she would not have been on that mission. It literally makes no sense for her to be out there.
I think it would have been.
Sorry, I didn't mean to dive back into like complaints about the game, but like,
I think it would have been cool if in one of those scenes as Ellie, like where you maybe saw that someone was pregnant, or maybe you had the opportunity of letting somebody just live, that maybe she made the right choice at one point in one of them. Like, in one situation, maybe somebody could have been the bigger person and done the right thing. And it could be argued that Abby did that with Lev and Yara, but when it comes to seeking vengeance or trying to take somebody out, it would have been nice if you would have been given the opportunity to just let somebody live. Like there should have been some sort of feature where it gave the player a little bit of control, like when you were fighting, like maybe the Seraphites, or maybe fighting somebody where they're like, okay, no, I give up. And they get down on their knees and they're begging for their life. And you literally could just let them live and they would just like run away. Like that would have been kind of neat. but they didn't do anything like that. And they easily could have. Go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, it doesn't serve the story, right? So like they wanted you to do all this shitty stuff. I mean, you're playing as Ellie. You're doing what Ellie's doing. Like the whole thing where you have to like, as Ellie, torture that one girl that was there when Joel was killed. And like that whole sequence with Owen and Mel in the aquarium where Ellie kills both of them. It's like one of the things about it is that like they did so well with the story is that like, and it's so very obvious in that scene where Ellie kills both of them that like she's trying so hard to be Joel. You know, she's getting the map out and she's telling them to like point on the map where Abby is and all that stuff. And like it's so powerful, but there's like, you know, but there's just some things about like the way that it's presented where it's like, I think they could have done this a little bit better, a little bit differently. But overall, I think the story is really powerful. I will say like, I don't want to go on all night, but I've got a couple of parts in the game that I thought were just incredibly powerful.
Yeah,
I mean,
let's hear 'em.
Obviously where Joel gets killed is really powerful. Specifically because, you know, you just help Abby. Joel just helped Abby, like saved her life. And then she turns around and just fucking murders him with a golf club. And then, and Ellie's really upset. But, some of the moments that I thought were just profoundly powerful is like that one where Abby and Lev break into the theater after they find Owen and Mel dead, and Abby has a gun. She shoots Jesse, and then she has a gun on Tommy, and she's like screaming at Ellie, and she says something along the lines of like, "We let you live, and you wasted it."
Oh yeah, right.
And it was just like so emotional. And then like the scene like almost immediately after that, wherever Abby is, she's got a knife to Dina's throat, and Ellie's like, she's pregnant, and Abby's like, good. And she's like getting ready to fucking kill her. And then Lev comes in and stops her, which is like really cool. And then the only other scene that I can think of off the top of my head that like really got me emotional was at the very end of the game where Ellie is like drowning Abby. And then there's that flash of just Joel sitting on the porch and like looks up at her. And then she stops drowning Abby. Like that is just one of the most powerful. Like it's so
well done.
But the way that they did it in the game was just like, it was so good. Like it actually gave me this really just rush of emotion. And then, you know, they show that whole flashback sequence of
their last conversation.
You know, because you don't think before this, you think that like the last thing that Joel and Ellie ever said to each other was that, or Ellie ever said to Joel was basically like, get the fuck out of here or whatever. It was like something mean, you know what I mean? And then, and then after that whole sequence at the end of the game, she reflects on everything that happened, and they were able to kind of make up, like not like 100% make up, but like get good again. And you see that sequence on the porch where Joel is like clearly crying because Ellie says that she wants to try and forgive him. And it's like, it's just a really powerful kind of, it's as much of a resolution as you're going to get because Joel's fucking dead now. But, it's about on par with what the last
the resolution that Joel got. Like but I think that if they do another one, I would like to see a situation where, you know, and I think Ellie holds herself accountable for telling him that she would like to forgive him, but she can't, because I mean, truthfully, that's a decision that a human has to make. Like either you can forgive somebody or you can't. And if you care enough about somebody, then you can forgive them. You know, you can try to put yourself in their shoes and forgive them. You can do that. You can give them that. But she didn't give him that completely. And then he died. And I think she held on to that, and she knew the whole time that she had not afforded Joel the opportunity of being forgiven for what he did. And that's her burden to bear almost at that point now, was her stubbornness and her, you know what I mean? Just being a teenage person, a teenager who doesn't understand that life is fragile, or somebody who doesn't appreciate, that the things that we have, even somebody who lives in this crazy world. Her relationship with Joel, it seems like, eventually became a relationship that she kind of took for granted. He became this rock in her life that was always going to be around, be a father figure. And, she was going to let him know one way or another that she was upset about it. And then also that, she cares enough about him that she was going to try to forgive him. She would like to, but I mean, she could have just as easily said, I understand, because if the tables were reversed and they were going to fucking kill Joel and present day Ellie had an opportunity to save him, she would. There's no doubt in my mind she would go save him. There's just no doubt. So, I mean, there's no way that she couldn't empathize with that situation and just give him what he needed. But be right, because it is The Last of Us that we couldn't see Joel get that resolution. But it could also be argued that because Ellie came there to try to save him, and one of the last things that he saw was her being forced to watch him get his head beat in with a golf club, he knew that she had forgiven him because she was there with him. You know what I mean? And that's the most that anybody can do for somebody else, is to be there with them when they die. You know what I mean? How hard it might be. That's like one of the greatest gifts you can give a person that you love, is to be there as they go to the other side of things. You know what I mean? So even though it was really tough for Ellie, I'm sure Joel, to some degree, took that as, I'm not sure, but I'm guessing he took that as some sort of, forgiveness from Ellie. And he knew that what they had was like a father-daughter thing. So, even though it was probably, man, I couldn't imagine being Joel in that situation, how heartbreaking that would be, knowing that you're going to get murdered in front of this girl that, like, you essentially view as your daughter, and she's going to have to live with that and experience that and feel helpless about that situation. Like that, it's just such a sad way to go for Joel.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of served like the way he lived, though, which makes sense. Eventually, I'm sure, he knew, and they kind of telegraphed that in the game, that he knew that somebody was going to get him eventually. He was a man of a very deep and dark past. One of the things I struggled with in the game is, like, why is it that everything you do is Ellie? And I didn't, until after the fact, I didn't really think about this. It's like, why is it that everything you do as Ellie just sucks? Everything sucks. Everything's horrible. Everything's dark and nasty. And then, like, everything you do as Abby is like fucking roses, comparatively speaking, right? She's helping people. She's growing and all this kind of stuff as a character, and yada, yada, yada. And Ellie is just diving deeper and deeper. And this character that you love is just going deeper and deeper into the fucking pits of hell. And, I read something somewhere that kind of shows, and it might have even been from Neil Druckmann or somebody. It kind of shows that, like, when you're playing as two people struggling with the same issue, and the issue is revenge, the difference is that Ellie has yet to get her revenge, whereas Abby is living past getting her revenge. So she's accomplished her life's goal, and she's just dealing with the aftermath and growing as a person and learning to get over what she did. Whereas, like, Ellie is still in the throes and the passions of, the heat of revenge. She hasn't accomplished it yet. So she's just going and doing whatever it takes to kind of
tunnel vision. Yeah,
it's a powerful plot device. I think some of this stuff, I will say that, like, and I don't know if this is necessarily I don't think this is necessarily the onus of the developer. I feel like some of the story beats and some of the messages that they were sending were a little bit too abstract, a little bit too buried, a little bit too, like, you have to read into this to know what's going on. Because there was a lot of shit that, until, like, I read a bunch of stuff and, like, the fucking Neil Druckmann explained it to me, I was like, oh, that makes sense. I'm not pissed off anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like, and maybe it's just me not being smart enough, but I feel like if it's me, there's a lot of people that feel the same way. Like, sometimes I hate to say that, like, as far as video games go, this game is high art, for example.
Oh, 100%.
You hate to, like, have to talk down to people, but there is a lot of fucking stupid people, myself included, that play these types of games that don't just pick up on these really complex story beats. And so when you get done playing the game, you're like, why the fuck did they do that? Why the fuck did they do that? That makes no sense. Why am I playing as an idiot the whole time? Like, no one would ever do this stuff. But it's like, Then you listen to an interview with Neil Druckmann and he talks about the motivations for the whole story. And you're like, oh, that makes fucking sense. I kind of wish I'd picked that up in the fucking game, but I get it. Like, it makes sense. You know what I mean? And I think they did a really great job with the story, and everything about it is super powerful. My first time through it, I just didn't pick up on some of this stuff, and it was immensely frustrating. Part of me, I don't know if I will, because I'm still like really shaky about it, but part of me wants to play through it again now that I kind of understand it a little bit better. Just on like the easiest fucking difficulty where I could just blast through everything, turn on all the accessibility options,
Game Plus,
and just like blow through the game.
And put it on easy.
Yeah. And so like, and then just to be able to kind of grab the story, then I can get all the collectibles and stuff. And because the platinum in this game should be relatively easy. I don't know if there's anything hard in it. It's mostly collect this shit and beat the game. Like, I don't even think you have to beat it on the hardest difficulty like you did the first game.
No. Yeah, I think you do have to play New Game Plus, though. Dude, I think that's really all we have to say. I knew that your wife had mentioned to me that she wanted us to talk briefly about an alternate ending theory. Ellie wearing a bracelet when she returns to the farmhouse, and she didn't have the bracelet on when her and Abby fight. Some people are speculating that, and her fingers look healed, that she actually returned back to Jackson after the fight. And after the fight, maybe she patched things up with Dina and got the bracelet, and then just went back to the farmhouse to kind of take a look at everything, play the guitar one more time. I don't buy it at all. Maybe the bracelet was in her backpack because she didn't want it to get ruined or something.
I mean, Sarah kind of talked to me about this too, and you know, I could buy into it. It seems a little bit too, I don't know, rosy for me.
Yeah.
But but the thing is that, you know, unless they were lying, like I watched a interview with Neil Druckmann where he basically said, like, they basically kind of, first he said that like the ending is meant to be vague. It's meant to be like kind of take your own thing away from it. Right. But he believes, and like these other people believe, that Ellie, you know, wasn't going back to Jackson. She was just kind of going off and to like deal with her shit. And
that's the impression I got.
It's one of those things where it's like, if the developer themselves say that, now that doesn't mean that, you know, they didn't put that in there as kind of like an Easter egg or whatever, and maybe they're just kind of denying it and they're like thumbing their nose at you or whatever. But like, I don't know, that's not the right expression, but like being cheeky, I guess. You know, I don't know that I necessarily believe it. I mean, it could be, it's something that if it was the truth, I wouldn't have a problem with it, and I guess it kind of is okay, but it seems a little too rosy for what the story is. So it, like, even if the developer didn't come out and say that they didn't think that was true, like, I have a hard time believing that they would end the game on a rosier note than just Ellie coming out of the darkness, right? I have a hard time because they're not going to do one of those closing sequences where like, yay, everybody's happy now, let's go to the dance together. And like, you know, it's just, that's not The Last of Us, right? If you think about how they ended the first one, it was like, just it ended with Joel just fucking lying to Ellie, and like it just kind of goes to black, and it's like that's pretty like they're not gonna end it on something as happy-go-lucky as what, you know, it was as happy as it was going to be. And I would say it was still a pretty happy ending. I mean, Ellie got out of her darkness, she dealt with what was going on, and she's kind of back in the real world, and she's at a point where she can rebuild herself now.
And she didn't kill Abby.
You know, maybe we'll see that in the next
she could
Last of Us game, but
she
didn't kill Abby. She could have, and she let her go.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, you'd have to really be a shitty person to kill Abby in the state that she was in. I mean, I don't think any regular human being would look at her emaciated like that on that cross and be like, a perfect opportunity, I'm going to cut you up. You know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't. I mean, you are becoming a non-human if you murder Abby in that situation. She was essentially defenseless, and then Ellie tried to make it a fair fight, kind of, but you know, she clearly was tortured by, and you know, we as humans try to take the path that we think is going to fix things, and you can't bring anyone back from the dead. You just can't do it. Like nothing you can do can get you more time with that person. Nothing you can do can revive them. Nothing you can do can bring back better memories. It's just, so it's essentially an eternal quest that there's no solution for. And I think she realized as she was choking her out under the water, trying to drown her, that like, it's not going to make anything better. It's not. And you just kind of have to resolve these things internally rather than externally. And I think maybe she came to that conclusion, and it came at a great cost to her. She lost Dina. She lost her fingers. She lost, unfortunately lost Joel. Tommy's pissed at her. I will say that something that real quick, and I know we're getting really long here. The one scene where you're playing as Abby and you start getting sniped by that dude, I didn't put two and two together. It was Tommy until she threw him off the fucking, whatever you want to call it, the boardwalk. Did you know that was Tommy while you were fighting the person?
Yeah. Basically, once we got to like the bridge thing, I was like, oh, okay. This is because I remembered when you're playing as Ellie and Jesse was like, we heard gunshots. What if that's Tommy? I got to go help him. And that's when Jesse and Ellie split up.
Okay.
And so I was like, oh, this is either Jesse or it's Tommy, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I my biggest problem with Tommy's character was just like the end, how he was just a fucking prick. And it's like, I mean, maybe he's got an axe to grind now that that he has trouble walking and his face is all fucked up from dealing with Abby. He talks about how Ellie gave him a promise and all this kind of shit. And it's like, dude, you didn't even want to fucking do it to begin with. You know what I mean? He didn't even want to go after Joel's killer to begin with.
But he did go before
Ellie. Now that this whole thing is over, like he's going to be a prick about it. He did, but I mean, that's true. I mean, Ellie, I guess maybe convinced him or whatever. But I don't know. I mean,
and they telegraphed that whole sniper thing too. If you think about it, there's that scene where Tommy is teaching Ellie how to use the gun, the sniping gun. So they telegraph that on, Ellie's side of the story. And I guess I didn't put that together till just now that, there's that scene where it's like Tommy's a great sniper all of a sudden. And he's like, she's like, can I use your gun? And he's like, oh, yeah, go ahead. And she's like, really? You don't mind? And like, apparently it was like his prized possession was that sniper weapon. So he apparently is a crack shot. And they established that early on in the game. And I guess that makes sense that, he seemed so lethal when you were Abby. And I didn't put it together that it was him, though. I just figured it was some random character, like another mini boss or something.
Yeah, it could have been.
Yeah. All right. Well, dude, that's all I think we got to say. I apologize to the listeners because I don't know. I'm probably going to edit this down, but this podcast is probably going to be delayed by a day or two because there's so much content here. It's going to take a while, and we're starting the work week here on Monday. So, Jake, I appreciate you being here, spending a late night doing this podcast. It's now 9:30, so we've been at it for almost 2 hours now doing the podcast, and I am going to edit it down. I haven't done any video reactions. I know I've been saying I've been going to do them, but I just haven't gotten around to it, and I feel kind of bad about that. But, we've been busy with music. I had gigs this week. You played with me on Thursday, and then Saturday I was down at the Lake Resort doing a gig, and we're back at it again. I'm back at it again, at least. No, we are the band. We're playing on Saturday, so we have music's kind of coming back in, and we are practicing social distancing and stuff, and we're trying to make it work as safely as we can. So I will try to do some more video reactions. There's a lot of content on there now that I'm sure I can react to. Jake, like I said, thanks for being here. This has been episode number 146 of PS This Is Awesome. As always, please tune into the show, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Thanks again for sticking with us through this long episode. So, like Nino Cooney, Neo, and No Man's Sky, PS This Is Awesome.